My cousin Nate has been in the Coast Guard for more than 10 years, and if there's one thing I know about him, it's that he doesn't make things up. He's not the type who believes in ghosts or supernatural nonsense. Nate is grounded, pragmatic, and not easily shaken, which is why the story he told me one summer evening in 2022 still sits in the back of my mind. It was about an assignment from 2017 when Nate was sent on a 2-week maintenance rotation to one of the most remote lighthouses off the coast of Maine, Matinicus Rock. The assignment. Matinicus Rock is the definition of isolation. It's just a jagged, rocky island out in the Atlantic with nothing but one automated lighthouse and a small auxiliary building for fuel and tools. No power grid, no plumbing, and cell reception so bad you might as well turn your phone off entirely. Normally, the Coast Guard sends just one person for these routine maintenance trips, but the year prior, there had been strange electrical failures, so this time they sent 2 people, Nate and another technician named Russell. The first few days were uneventful. Windy, dull, repetitive work, checking the beacon's mechanics, testing backup batteries, refilling the diesel generator, and scraping off salt corrosion from every exposed metal surface. At night, they'd cook simple meals, read books, and play cards to kill time. It was isolation, but expected isolation, at least at first. The first sign. Something was wrong. On the 4th night, Nate woke up suddenly at 2 a.m. Something felt off. The air was heavier than usual, like the charged atmosphere before a thunderstorm, except the sky outside was clear and silent. He sat up and noticed the sweeping light beam from the beacon wasn't rotating. That was a huge problem. A dark lighthouse means ships at risk. Nate shook Russell awake, and together they climbed the narrow spiral staircase to the top. The gears were moving, but something was physically jamming the mechanism. A large, dark, slimy piece of fabric wedged deep into the rotation assembly. It smelled like rotting seaweed and mildew. The doors were locked, the windows sealed. There was no way wind or birds could have gotten in. They removed the cloth, tossed it outside, and went back to bed, chalking it up as an odd fluke. Until the next night, when it happened again. The red shawl, same time, 2 a.m. Again, the beacon was jammed, but this time it was with a red frayed shawl, soaked as though it had just been pulled from the ocean, tiny crustaceans clinging to its threads. Nate said that's when the weird feeling turned into something darker, like they were being watched. They double-checked every door and window. Everything was locked. From then on, they blocked the stairwell each night with heavy crates and locked everything religiously. But things only escalated. Russell's change. By the 7th night, Russell started acting strange. Nate woke up to hear him whispering to the empty corner of the room. When asked who he was talking to, Russell seemed confused and said he hadn't been saying anything. The next night, Nate woke up again to find Russell sitting by the window, staring down at the rocks below. He said he'd seen someone standing on the edge of the beacon's light beam the night before. From then on, Russell barely spoke, stopped sleeping, and muttered about voices in the stairwell. The footsteps. On the 9th night, they both heard footsteps on the spiral stairs. Not wind or shifting metal, real footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving downward from the beacon room above them. Neither man had been up there. They froze, listening, but the footsteps eventually stopped. That night, they barricaded their bedroom door with a dresser and slept with knives under their pillows. The breaking point. On the 11th night, the beacon failed again. When they reached the top, the door was wide open, like someone had kicked it in. The bulb had been removed entirely and placed upright in the middle of the room. Nate felt something cold brush against his back. He spun around, but no one was there. Russell went pale, whispering, "A hand. I saw a hand come out of the wall." They ran back to their room and locked themselves in. Russell sat rocking in the corner, whispering to someone who wasn't there. Nate didn't sleep at all. The distress call. At sunrise, Nate used the emergency SAT phone to request early pickup, reporting mechanical failure. The rescue boat arrived that afternoon, but the crew asked about a distress call they'd received at 2:12 a.m., a garbled transmission with a voice saying, "Someone's here with us." Nate swears he never made that call. Russell quit the Coast Guard a few months later. Nate still does maintenance duty, but he refuses ever to return to Matinicus Rock. The second story happened during the COVID lockdowns when the world felt frozen, and people were desperate for something, anything, to break the monotony. I was single, bored, and spending way too much time on my phone. That's how I reconnected with Sophia. Soph, as she called herself, someone I'd been following on Instagram for years. We lived only a few minutes apart in Suffolk County, Long Island, and after weeks of chatting online, we decided to meet up one random Tuesday night. An impulsive plan. The night started normal enough. I picked her up, and we drove to a nearby park. It was technically closed, but that didn't stop us from hopping the fence and having a couple of White Claws. Soph had that kind of energy that was equal parts exciting and slightly reckless. Within an hour, she suggested something bolder. "Let's drive to Montauk and check out the lighthouse cliffs." I hesitated. The Montauk Lighthouse was technically closed at night, and maybe closed altogether because of lockdown, but Soph didn't care. "Nobody's gonna be out there on a Tuesday night," she said. And honestly, she was probably right. I agreed. Reaching the lighthouse. The drive out east was quiet, the roads nearly empty. When we arrived, she told me to park right in the lighthouse lot. There were no cars, no security trucks, nothing but the faint, rotating light above. We had another drink in the car, then started walking. There's something about seeing a lighthouse at night up close. It's beautiful, but also unnerving. That giant tower surrounded by nothing but darkness, and the rhythmic sweep of its light beam feels almost otherworldly. Soph took me along a side trail that led behind the lighthouse to the cliff walk, a rocky path along the edge of the ocean. We navigated with our phone flashlights because, strangely, almost every exterior light was off except the main beacon and a few by the front entrance. The man in the hood. We had barely made it halfway down the cliff walk when Soph said my name in a quiet but sharp tone. I turned, and she was pointing her light behind us. That's when I saw him. A man in a hooded coat was standing on the rocks. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. I called out, asking if he worked there. He said nothing. My heart sank. He wasn't security, just some random guy, silently watching us in the dark. "Let's keep moving," I whispered to Soph. She went ahead, and I followed, but every time we glanced back, he was still there, walking at our pace, staying the same distance behind. The chase. We reached the end of the cliff walk and turned toward the grass leading back to the car. That's when things escalated. Not only was the hooded man still behind us, but two more men appeared from another path and started moving toward us. They didn't run, but their speed was unnerving, deliberate, closing the gap fast. One of them shouted something we couldn't make out. My gut screamed, "Don't run, they'll chase you." So we walked as fast as we could without breaking into a sprint. "Where are you going?" one of them yelled. His voice carried an edge I didn't like one bit. We reached the car just as all three of them got within a few feet. I locked the doors the second we were inside. That's when one of them yanked at the back handle while another pounded the passenger side window. The third kicked the rear bumper. I slammed the car into reverse and peeled out of the lot. Aftermath. They didn't chase us. Maybe they were just trying to scare us. Or maybe it could have been something worse if we had hesitated even a few seconds. On the silent ride back, adrenaline still pumping, Soph and I barely said a word. We eventually laughed nervously, trying to play it off, but neither of us really believed it was funny. To this day, I don't know who those guys were or what they wanted. Some of my friends guessed it was gang activity. Others said maybe it was just bored troublemakers. All I know is that night changed the way I feel about the Montauk Lighthouse. It's beautiful in daylight, but I'll never go near it after dark again. My old friend Ian told me this story years ago, and it has haunted me ever since. Ian wasn't the type to embellish. He was a tough, salt-weathered man in his 50s, with decades of experience in marine salvage and coastal infrastructure. If something broke near the ocean, piers, boats, even old lighthouses, he was the guy you called. This story happened in 2013, when a small county in Washington state hired him to inspect an old, decommissioned lighthouse on a remote island. The county didn't know whether to tear it down or restore it, and Ian's job was simple: go there alone, assess the structure, and decide if it was safe for restoration. Isolation on the rock. The lighthouse sat on a small rock island about an hour off the mainland. There were no docks, no roads, no signs of life, just one tower, a generator shed, and rusting scaffolding from decades ago. A small Coast Guard boat dropped him off Monday morning with supplies for 4 days, a sleeping bag, tools, and a two-way marine radio. He planned to finish by Wednesday and call for pickup on Thursday. At first, everything seemed normal. Quiet. Too quiet, in fact. No birds, no insects, no waves hitting the rocks, just an eerie stillness. The first oddity. On the second day, heavy fog rolled in, thick enough to make the outside world vanish beyond a few feet. While inspecting the staircase leading to the beacon room, Ian noticed a maintenance closet that had been sealed shut by corrosion on day one. Now, it was open slightly, just an inch, but clearly moved. Inside, in the far corner, sat a small wooden box, damp and covered with moss, like it had been underwater. He didn't open it, just shut the closet and made a note to report it later. The footsteps. That night, Ian woke to a strange silence, like the world had stopped breathing. Then came footsteps on the spiral stairs, slow, deliberate, climbing upward. Ian froze, flashlight in hand, staring at the stairwell entrance. But no one came down, and eventually, the sound stopped. By morning, he convinced himself it was nothing, maybe the structure settling. Still, he searched every inch of the tower. No signs of an intruder. But the wooden box. It was now sitting halfway out of the closet in the stairwell. He finally picked it up. It was heavier than expected, bloated from moisture and nailed shut. He set it aside at the base of the stairs, uneasy but determined to finish his work. Barefoot tracks. Outside, Ian noticed something else. Bare footprints circling the lighthouse. Not boots. Not shoes. Bare feet. Wet, with water still dripping into the dirt, leading toward the cliff edge. And stopping. No returning prints. He checked the radio, tempted to call for early pickup, but heavy fog made that risky. Instead, he locked every door and hatch, even wedging the stairwell shut with an iron pipe. The knocking. That night was worse. Around 1:30 a.m., the door to the beacon room slammed so hard that dust rained down from the ceiling. Then came 3 slow knocks, not on the door, but on the wall, as if someone were inside the structure itself, rapping their knuckles from behind the brick. Ian didn't move, didn't breathe. When dawn came, the wooden box was gone, and the closet door was fully open. The final hours. Ian radioed for emergency extraction, claiming medical issues to avoid questions. But with the fog so thick, the rescue boat said it would take hours. He packed his gear and waited by the landing ledge. Hours passed in suffocating silence, the fog thickening, cold air biting his face. That's when he heard it. Footsteps again. Behind him this time, crunching in the gravel around the lighthouse base. He spun around, but saw nothing. just a wall of fog. Ian bolted to the cliff's edge and didn't move until he heard the boat horn hours later. When the crew pulled him aboard, he was pale, shaking. Aftermath. He filed a minimal report, calling the lighthouse structurally compromised and recommending it be sealed. He didn't mention the box, the footsteps, or the footprints. Within a year, Ian quit fieldwork altogether, choosing to work only on land-based projects. When I asked him years later what he thought happened on that island, he just said, "Some places aren't meant to be disturbed. They just need time and silence." I once tried to look up the coordinates he'd scribbled in his notes. There's no listed lighthouse there. County records mention a decommissioned tower but provide no name and no public history. It's as if that lighthouse, and whatever was inside, never existed.